Hello, weary traveller. Come, sit down, I welcome your companionship. Let us continue with the merry adventures of Robin Hood. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, here we go. Robin Hood shoots before Queen Eleanor. The high road stretched white and dusty in the hot summer afternoon sun, and the trees stood motionless along the roadside. All across the meadowlands the hot air danced and quivered, and in the limpid waters of the lowland brook, spanned by a little stone bridge, the fish hung motionless above the yellow gravel, and the dragonfly sat quite still, perched upon the sharp tip of a spike of the rushes, with its wings glistening in the sun. Along the road a youth came riding upon a fair milk-white barb, and the folk that he passed stopped and turned and looked after him, for never had so lovely a lad, or one so gaily clad, been seen in Nottingham before. He could not have been more than 16 years of age, and was as fair as any maiden. His long yellow hair flowed behind him as he rode, all clad in silk and velvet, with jewels flashing and dagger jingling against the pommel of his saddle. Thus came the Queen's page, young Richard Partington, from the famous London town to Nottinghamshire, upon her Majesty's bidding, to seek Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest. The road was hot and dusty, and his journey had been long, for that day he had come all the way from Leicester town, a good 20 miles and more. Wherefore young Partington was right glad when he saw before him a sweet little inn, all shady and cool beneath the trees, in front of the door of which a sign hung pendant, bearing the picture of a blue boar. Here he drew rein and called loudly for a bottle of Rhenish wine to be brought to him, for stout country ale was too coarse a drink for this young gentleman. 5 lusty fellows sat upon a bench beneath the pleasant shade of a wide-spreading oak in front of the inn door, drinking ale and beer, and all stared at this fair and gallant lad. 2 of the stoutest of them were clothed in Lincoln green, and a great heavy oaken staff leaned against the gnarled oak tree beside each fellow. The landlord came and brought a bottle of wine and a long narrow glass upon a salver, which he held up to the page as he sat upon his horse. Young Partington poured forth the bright yellow wine, and holding the glass aloft, cried, "Here is to the health and long happiness of my royal mistress, the noble Queen Eleanor, and may my journey and her desiring soon have end, and I find a certain stout yeoman men call Robin Hood." At these words all stared, but presently the 2 stout yeomen in Lincoln green began whispering together. Then one of the 2, whom Partington thought to be the tallest and stoutest fellow he had ever beheld, spoke up and said, "What seekest thou of Robin Hood, Sir Page? And what does our good Queen Eleanor wish of him? I ask this of thee, not foolishly, but with reason, for I know somewhat of this stout yeoman." "And thou knowest aught of him, good fellow," said the young Partington. "Thou wilt do great service to him, and great pleasure to our royal queen, by aiding me to find him." Then up spake the other yeoman, who was a handsome fellow with sunburned face and nut-brown curling hair. "Thou hast an honest look, Sir Page, and our queen is kind and true to all stout yeomen. Methinks I and my friend here might safely guide thee to Robin Hood, for we know where we may be found. Yet I tell thee plainly, we would not for all of merry England have aught of harm befall him." "Set thy mind at ease, I have naught of ill with thee," quoth Richard Partington. "I bring a kind message to him from our queen, and therefore ye know where he is to be found. I pray you to guide me thither." Then the 2 yeomen looked at one another again, and the tall man said, "Surely it would be safe to do this thing, Will?" whereat the other nodded. Thereupon both rose, and the tall yeoman said, "We think thou art true, Sir Page, and meanest no harm. Therefore we will guide thee to Robin Hood, as thou dost wish." Then Partington paid his score, and the young yeoman coming forward, they all straightway departed on their way. Under the greenwood tree, in the cool shade that spread all around upon the sward, with flickering lights here and there, Robin Hood and many of his band lay upon the soft green grass, while Alan a Dale sang and played upon his sweetly sounding harp. All listened in silence, for young Alan's singing was one of the greatest joys in all the world to them. But as they so listened, there came of a sudden the sound of a horse's feet, and presently Little John and Will Stutely came forth from the forest path to the open glade, young Richard Partington riding between them upon his milk-white horse. The 3 came toward where Robin Hood sat, all the band staring with might and main, for never had they seen so gay a sight as this young page. nor one so richly clad in silks and velvets and gold and jewels. Then Robin rose and stepped forth to meet them, and Partington leaped from his horse, and doffing his caps of crimson velvet, met Robin as he came. "Now welcome," cried Robin, "now welcome, fair youth, and tell me, I prithee, what bringeth one of so fair a presence, and clad in such noble garb, to our poor forest of Sherwood?" Then young Partington said, "If I err not, thou art the famous Robin Hood, and these thy stout band of outlawed yeomen. To thee I bring the greetings of our noble Queen Eleanor. Oft hath she heard thee spoken of and thy merry doings hereabout, and fain would she behold thy face. Therefore she bids me to tell thee that if thou wilt presently come to London town, she will do all in her power to guard thee against harm, and will send thee safe back to Sherwood Forest again. 4 days hence in Finsbury Fields our good King Henry of great renown holdeth a grand shooting match, and all the most famous archers of merry England will be thereat. Our Queen would fain say thee strive with these, knowing that if thou wilt come thou wilt of little doubt carry off the prize. Therefore she hath sent me with this greeting, and furthermore sends thee as a sign of great goodwill this golden ring from off her own fair thumb, which I give herewith to thy hands." Then Robin Hood bowed his head, and taking the ring, kissed it right loyally, then slipped it upon his little finger. Quoth he, "Sooner would I lose my life than this ring, and ere it departs from me, my hand shall be cold in death, or stricken off at the wrist. Fair Sir Page, I will do our Queen's bidding, and we'll presently hie with thee to London. But ere we go, I will feast thee here in the woodlands with the very best we have." "It may not be," said the page, "if we had time to tarry, but we do not. Therefore get thyself ready straightway, and if there be any of thy band who would take of thee, our Queen beats thee that she will make them right welcome likewise." "Truly thou art right," quoth Robin, "and we will have but short time to stay. Therefore I will get me ready presently. I will choose 3 of my men only to go with me, and these 3 shall be the Little John, mine own right-hand man, Will Scarlet, my cousin, and Allan a Dale, my minstrel. Go, lads, and get ye ready straightway, and we will presently off with all speed that we may. Thou, Will Stutely, shall be the chief of the band while I am gone." Then Little John and Will Scarlet and Allan a Dale ran leaping full of joy to make themselves ready, while Robin also prepared himself for the journey. After a while they all 4 came forth, and a right fair sight they made, for Robin was clad in blue from head to foot, and Little John and Will Scarlet in good Lincoln green, and as for Allan a Dale, he was dressed in scarlet from the crown of his head to the toes of his pointed shoes. Each man wore beneath his cap a little head covering of burnished steel, set with rivets of gold, and underneath his jerkin a coat of linked mail, as fine as carded wool, yet so tough that no arrow could pierce it. Then, seeing all were ready, young Partington mounted his horse again, and the yeomen, having shaken hands all around, all 5 departed on their way. That night they took up their inn in Melton Mowbray, in Leicestershire, and the next night they lodged at Kettering, in Northamptonshire, and the next at Bedford Town, and the next at St. Albans, in Hertfordshire. This place they left not long after the middle of the night, and travelling fast through the tender dawning of the summer day, when the dews lay shining on the meadows, and faint mists hung in the dales, when all birds sang their sweetest, and the cobwebs beneath the hedges glimmered like the fairy cloth of silver, they came at last to the towers and walls of famous London town, where the morn was still young and all golden toward the east. Queen Eleanor sat in her royal bower, though the open casements of which poured the sweet yellow sunshine in great floods of golden light. All about her stood ladies in waiting, chatting in low voices, while she herself sat dreamily where the mild air came softly dripping into the room, laden with the fresh perfumes of the sweet red roses that bloomed in the great garden beneath the wall. To her came one who said that her page Richard Partington and 4 stout yeomen waited her pleasure in the court below. Then Queen Eleanor arose joyously, and bade them be straightway shown to her presence. Thus Robin Hood and Little John and Will Scarlet and Allan a Dale came before the Queen into her own royal bower. Then Robin kneeled before the Queen, with his hands folded upon his breast, saying in simple phrase, "Here am I, Robin Hood. Thou didst bid me come, and lo, I do thy bidding. I give myself to thee as thy true servant, and will do thy commanding, even if it be to the shedding of the last drop of life's blood." But good Queen Eleanor smiled presently upon him, bidding him to rise. Then she made them all be seated to rest themselves after their long journey. Rich food was brought them, and noble wines, and she had her own pages to wait upon the wants of the yeomen. At last, after they had all eaten all they could, she began questioning them of their merry adventures. Then they told her all of the lusty doings herein spoken of, and among others that concerning the Bishop of Hereford, or Richard of the Lee, and how the bishop had abided 3 days in Sherwood Forest. At this the queen and the ladies about her laughed again and again, for they pictured themselves the stout bishop abiding in the forest, and ranging the woods in lusty sport with Robin and his band. Then, when they had all told what they could bring to mind, the queen asked Alan to sing for her, for his fame as a minstrel had reached even the court in London town. So straightway Alan took up his harp in his hand, and, without more asking, touched the strings lightly till they all rang sweetly, and he sang thus. Gentle river, bright thy crystal waters flow, sliding where the aspens shiver, gliding where the lilies blow, singing o'er the pebbled shadows, kissing blossoms bending low, breaking 'neath the dipping swallows, purpling where the breezes blow. Floating on thy breast forever, down the current I could glide. Grief and pain should reach me never, on thy bright and gentle tide. So my aching heart seeks thine love, that to find its rest and peace, for through loving bliss is mine love, and my many troubles cease. Thus Alan sang, and as he sang all eyes dwelled upon him, and not a sound broke the stillness, and even after he had done the silence hung for a short space. So the time passed till the hour drew nigh for the holding of the great archery match in Finsbury Fields. A gay sight were the famous Finsbury Fields on that bright and sunny morning of lusty summer-time. Along the end of the meadow stood the booths for the different bands of archers, for the king's yeomen were divided into companies of 80 men, and each company had a captain over it. So on the bright greensward stood 10 booths of striped canvas, a booth for each band of the royal archers, and at the peak of each fluttered a flag in the mellow air, and the flag was the colour that belonged to the captain of each band. From the centre booth hung the yellow flag of Tepus, the famous bow-bearer of the king. Next to it, on one hand, was the blue flag of Gilbert of the White Hand, and on the other the blood-red pennant of the stout young Clifton of Buckinghamshire. The 7 other archer captains were also men of great renown. Among them were Egbert of Kent and William of Southampton, but those first named were the most famous of all. The noise of many voices and talk and laughter came within the booths, and in and out ran the attendants like ants about an ant-hill. Some bore ale and beer, others some bundles of bowstrings or sheaves of arrows. On each side of the archery range were rows upon rows of seats reaching high aloft, and in the centre of the north side was a raised dais for the king and queen, shaded by canvas of gay colours, and hung about with streaming silken pennants of red and blue and green and white. As yet the king and queen had not come, but all the other benches were full of people, rising head above head, high aloft, till it made the eye dizzy to look upon them. 80 yards distant from the mark from the archers were to shoot from stood 10 fair targets, each target marked by a flag of the colour belonging to the band that was to shoot thereat. So all was ready for the coming of the king and queen. At last a great blast of bugles sounded, and into the meadow came riding 6 trumpeters with 6 silver trumpets, from which hung velvet banners heavy with rich workings of silver and gold thread. Behind these came stout King Henry upon a dapple-grey stallion, and his queen beside him on a milk-white palfrey. On either side of them walked the yeomen of the guard, the bright sunlight flashing from the polished blades of the steel halberds they carried. Behind these came the court in a great crowd, so that presently all the lawn was alive with bright colours, with silk and velvet, with waving plumes and gleaming gold, with flashing jewels and sword hilts, a gallant sight on that bright summer day. Then all the people arose and shouted so that their voices sounded upon the storm upon the Cornish coast, with the dark waves run upon the shore and leap and break surging amid the rocks. So amid the roaring and surging of the people, of the waving of scarves and kerchiefs, the king and queen came to their place and, getting down from the horses, mounted the broad stairs that led to the raised platform, and there took their seats on 2 thrones bedecked with purple silks and cloths of silver and gold. When all was quiet, a bugle sounded, and straightway the archers came marching in order from their tents. 40 they were in all, as stalwart a band of yeomen as could be found in all the wide world. So they came in orderly fashion, and stood in front of the dais where King Henry and his queen sat. King Henry looked up and down their ranks right proudly, for his heart warmed within him at the sight of such a gallant band of yeomen. Then he bade his herald, Sir Hugh de Mowbray, stand forth and proclaim the rules governing the game. So Sir Hugh stepped up to the edge of the platform and spoke in a loud, clear voice, and thus he said, "That each man should shoot 7 arrows at the target that belonged to his band, and of the 80 yeomen of each band, the 3 that shot the best should be chosen. These 3 should shoot 3 arrows apiece, and the one that shot the best should again be chosen. Then each of these should again shoot 3 arrows apiece, and the one that shot the best should have the first prize, the one that shot the next best should have the second, and the one that shot the next best should have the third prize. Each of the others should have 80 silver pennies for his shooting. The first prize was to be 20 golden pounds, a silver bugle horn inlaid with gold, and a quiver with 10 white arrows tipped with gold and feathered with the white swan's wing therein. The second prize was to be 50 of the fattest bucks that run on Dallen Lee, to be shot when the yeoman had won them chose. The third prize was to be 2 tons of good Rhenish wine." So Sir Hugh spoke, and when he had done, all the archers waved their bows aloft and shouted. Then each band turned and marched back in order to his place. And now the shooting began, the captains first taking stand and speeding their shafts and making all room for the men who shot, each in turn after them. 280 shafts were shot in all, and so deftly were they sped, that when the shooting was done, each target looked like the back of a hedgehog when a farm dog snuffs at it. A long time was taken in this shooting, and when it was over, the judges came forward, looked carefully at the targets, and proclaimed in a loud voice which 3 had shot the best from the separate bands. Then a great hubbub of voices arose for each man among the crowd that looked upon calling for his favoured archer. Then 10 fresh targets were brought forward, and every sound was hushed as the archers took their places once more. This time the shooting was more speedily done, for only 9 shafts were shot by each band. Not an arrow missed the targets, but in that of Gilbert of the White Hand 5 arrows were in a small white spot that marked the centre, and of these 5, 3 were sped by Gilbert. When the judges came forward again and looked at the targets, called aloud the names of the archer chosen as the best bowman of each band. Of these Gilbert the White Hand led, for 6 of the 10 arrows he had shot had lodged in the centre, but stout Tepus and young Clifton trod close upon his heels, yet the others stood a fair chance for the 2nd or 3rd place. And now, amid the roaring of the crowd, those 10 stout fellows that were left went back to their tents to rest a while and change their bowstrings, for naught must fail at this next round, and no hand must tremble or eye grow dim because of the weariness. Then, while the deep buzz and hum of the talking sounded all around like the noise of the wind in the leafy forest, Queen Eleanor turned to the king, and quoth she, "Thinkest thou that the yeomen so chosen are the very best archers in all of merry England?"
"Yea, truly," said the king, smiling, for he was well pleased with the sport that he had seen, "and I tell thee that not only are they the best archers in all merry England, but in all the wide world beside."
"But wouldst thou say," quoth Queen Eleanor, "if I were to find 3 archers that match the best 3 yeomen of all thy guard?"
"I would say that thou hast done what I could not do," said the king, laughing, "for I tell thee that there lives not in all the world 3 archers to match Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton from Buckinghamshire."
"Now," said the queen, "I know of 3 yeomen, and in truth I have seen them not long since, that I would not fear to match against thy any 3 that thou canst choose from amongst all thy 80 archers, and moreover I will match them here this very day."
But I will only match them with thy archers, providing that thou wilt grant a free pardon to all that may come in my behalf." At this the king laughed loud and long. "Truly," said he, "thou art taking up with strange matters for a queen. If thou wilt bring these 3 fellows that thou speakest of, I will promise to faithfully give them free pardon for 40 days, to come or go wheresoever they please, nor will I harm a hair from their heads in all that time. Moreover, if these that thou bringest shoot us better than my yeomen, man for man, they shall keep the prizes for themselves according to their shooting. But as thou hast so taken up of a son with sports of this kind, hast thou a mind for a wager?" "Why, in sooth," said Queen Eleanor, laughing, "I know not of such matters, but if thou hast a mind to do somewhat in that way, I will strive to pleasure thee. What wilt thou wager upon thy men?" Then the merry king laughed again, for he dearly loved a goodly jest, and he said amidst his laughter, "I will wager thee 10 tuns of Rhenish wine, 10 tuns of the stoutest ale, and 10 score bows of tempered Spanish yew, with quivers and arrows to match." All that stood around smiled at this, for it seemed a merry wager for a king to give a queen. But Queen Eleanor bowed her head quietly. "I will take thy wager," said she, "for I know right well where to place those things that thou hast spoken of. Now, who will be on my side in this matter?" And she looked round upon them that stood about, but no one spake or cared to wager upon the queen's side against such archers as Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton. Then the queen spoke again. "Now who will back me in this wager? Wilt thou, my lord bishop of Hereford?"
"Nay," said the bishop hastily, "it ill befalls one of my cloth to deal in such matters. Moreover, there are no such archers as his majesty's in all the world, therefore I would but lose my money."
"Methinks thy thought of thy gold weigheth more heavily with thee than the wrong of thy cloth," said the queen, smiling, and at this a ripple of laughter went around, for everyone who knew how fond the bishop was of his money. Then the queen turned to a knight who stood near, whose name was Sir Robert Lee. "Wilt thou back me in this manner?" said she. "Thou art surely rich enough to risk so much for the sake of a lady."
"To my pleasure, the queen, I will do it," said Sir Robert Lee, "but for the sake of no other in all the world would I wager quote, for no man can stand against Tepus and Gilbert and Clifton."
Then, turning to the king, Queen Eleanor said, "I want no such aid as Sir Robert giveth me, but against thine wine and beer and stout bows of yew I wager this girdle all set with jewels from about my waist, and surely that is worth more than thine." "Now I will take thy wager," quoth the king. "Send for thy archers straightway. But here come forth the others. Let them shoot, and I will match those that win against all the world." "So be it," said the queen. Thereupon, beckoning to young Richard Partington, she whispered something in his ear, and straightway the page bowed and left the place, crossing the meadow to the other side of the range, where he was presently lost in the crowd. At this, all that stood around whispered to one another, wondering what it all meant, and what 3 men the queen was about to set against those famous archers of the king's guard. And now the 10 archers of the king's guard took their stand again, and all the deep crowd was hushed to the stillness of death. Slowly and carefully each man shot his shafts, and so deep was the silence that you could hear every arrow rap against the target as it struck it. Then, when the last shaft had sped, a great roar went up, and the shooting, I wot, was well worthy of the sound. Once again Gilbert had lodged 3 arrows in the white. Tepus came second with 2 in the white and 1 in the black ring next to it, but stout Clifton had gone down, and Sir Hubert of Suffolk had taken the 3rd place, for, while both of those 2 good yeomen had lodged 2 in the white, Clifton had lost 1 shot upon the 4th ring, and Hubert came in with 1 in the 3rd. All the archers around Gilbert's booth shouted for joy till their throats were hoarse, tossing their caps aloft and shaking hands with one another. In the midst of all the noise and hubbub, 5 men came walking across the lawn towards the king's pavilion. The first was Richard Partington, and was known to most folk there, but the others were strange to everybody. Besides young Partington walked a yeoman clad in blue, and behind came 3 others, 2 in Lincoln green and 1 in scarlet.
The last yeoman carried 3 stout bows of yew tree, 2 fancifully inlaid with silver and 1 with gold. While these 5 men came walking across the meadow, a messenger came running from the king's booth and summoned Gilbert and Tepus and Hubert to go with him. And now the shouting quickly ceased, for all saw that something unwonted was toward, so the folk stood up in their places and leaned forward to see what was the ado. When Partington and the others came before the spot where the king and queen sat, the foreman yeomen bent their knees and doffed their caps unto her. King Henry leaned forward and stared at them closely, but the Bishop of Hereford, when he saw their faces, started as though stung by a wasp. He opened his mouth as though to speak, but, looking up, he saw the queen gazing at him with a smile upon her lips, so he said nothing, but bit his nether lip, while his face was as red as a cherry. When the queen leaned forward and bade in a clear voice, "Locksley," said she, "I have made a wager with the king that thou and 2 of thy men shall outshoot any 3 which he can stand against you. Wilt thou do thy best for my sake?" "Yea," quoth Robin Hood, to whom she spake, "I will do my best for thy sake, and if I fail, I make my vow never to finger a bowstring more." Now, although Little John had been somewhat abashed in the queen's power, he felt himself the sturdy fellow that he was when the soles of his feet pressed against the green grass again, so he said boldly, "Now blessing us on thy sweet face, say I, and there lived a man that would not do his best for thee, I will say not, only I would like to have a cracking of his knave's pate." "Peace, Little John," said Robin Hood hastily in a low voice, but good Queen Eleanor laughed aloud, and a ripple of merriment sounded all over the booth. The Bishop of Hereford did not laugh, and neither did the king, but he turned to the queen, and quoth he, "Who are these men that thou hast brought before us?" Then up spoke the bishop hastily, for he could not hold his peace any longer.
"Your Majesty," quoth he, "yon fellow in blue is a certain outlawed thief of the mid-country named Robin Hood. Yon tall strapping villain goeth by the name of Little John, and the other fellow in green is a certain backsliding gentleman known as Will Scarlet, and the man in red is a rogue of a northern minstrel named Eleanor." At this speech the king's brows drew together blackly, and he turned to the queen. "Is this true?" said he sternly. "Yea," said the queen, smiling, "the bishop hath told the truth, and truly he would know them well, for he and 2 of his friars spent 3 days in merry sport with Robin Hood in rare Sherwood Forest. I did little think that the good bishop would so betray his friends. But bear in mind that thou hast pledged thy promise for the safety of these good yeomen for 40 days. "I will keep my promise," said the king, in a deep voice that showed the anger in his heart, "but when these 40 days are gone, I'd let this outlaw look to himself, for mayhap things will not go so smoothly with him as he would like." Then he turned to his archers, who stood near the Sherwood yeomen, listening and wondering at all that had passed. Quoth he, "Gilbert, and thou Tepus, and thou Hubert, I have pledged myself that ye shall shoot against these 3 fellows. If ye outshoot the knaves, I will fill your cups with silver pennies. If ye fail, ye shall lose your prizes that ye have won so fairly, and they go to them that shooteth against you man to man. Do your best, lads, and if ye win this bout, ye shall be glad of it to the last days of your life. Now go, and get you gone to the butts." Then the 3 archers of the king turned and went back to their booths, and Robin and his men went to their places at the mark from which they were to shoot. Then they strung their bows and made themselves ready, looking over their quivers of arrows, and picking out the roundest and the best feathered. But when the king's archers went to their tents, they told their friends what had passed, and how that these 4 men were the famous Robin Hood and 3 of his band, to wit, Little John, the Will Scarlet, and Eleanor Dale. The news of this buzzed around amongst the archers and the booths, for there was not a man there who had not heard of these great mid-country yeomen. From the archers the news was taken up by the crowd that looked on at the shooting, so that at last everybody stood up, craning their necks to catch sight of the famous outlaws. 6 fresh targets were now set up, 1 for each man that was to shoot, whereupon Gilbert and Tepus and Hubert came straightway forth from the booths. Then Robin Hood and Gilbert of the White Hand tossed a farthing aloft to see who should lead the shooting, and the lot fell to Gilbert's side. Thereupon he called upon Hubert of Suffolk to lead. Hubert took his place, planted his foot firmly, and fitted a fair, smooth arrow. Then, breathing upon his fingertips, he drew the string slowly and carefully.
The arrow sped true and lodged in the white. Again he shot, and again he hit the clout. A third shaft he sped, but this time failed of the centre, but struck the black, yet not more than a finger's breadth from the white. At this a shout went up, for it was the best shooting that Hubert had done yet that day. Merry Robin laughed, and quoth he, Thou wilt have an ill time bettering that round, Will, for it is thy turn next. Brace thy thews, lad, and bring not shame upon Sherwood. Then Will Scarlet took his place, but because of over-caution he spoiled his target with the very first arrow that he had sped, for he hit the next ring to the black, and second from the centre. At this Robin bit his lips. Lad, lad, quoth he, hold not the string so long. Have I not often told thee what Gaffer Swanthold saith, that over-caution spilleth the milk? To this Will Scarlet took heed, and so the next arrow he shot lodged fairly in the centre ring. Again he shot, and again he smote the centre, but, for all that, stout Hubert had outshot him, and showed the better target. Then all those that looked on clapped their hands for joy, because that Hubert had overcome the stranger. Quoth the king grimly to the queen, If thy archers shoot no better than that, then thou art like to lose thy wager, lady. But Queen Eleanor smiled, for she looked for better things from Robin Hood and Little John. And now Tepus took his place to shoot. He also took over heed to what he was about, and so he fell into Will Scarlet's error. The first arrow he struck into the centre ring, but the second missed its mark, and smote the black. And the last arrow was tipped with luck, for it smote the very centre of the clout upon the black spot that marked it. Quoth Robin Hood, That is the sweetest shot that hath been sped this day, but nevertheless, friend Tepus, thy cake is burned, methinks. Little John, it is thy turn next. So Little John took his place as bidden, and shot his 3 arrows quickly. He never lowered his bow arm in all the shooting, but fitted each shaft with his longbow raised. Yet all 3 of his arrows smote the centre within easy distance of the black. At this no sound of shouting was heard, for although it was the best shooting that had been done that day, the folk of London town did not like to see the stout Tepus overcome by a fellow from the countryside, even were he as famous as Little John. And now stout Gilbert of the White Hand took his place and shot with the greatest care, and again for the 3rd time in one day he struck all 3 shafts into the clout. Well done, Gilbert, quoth Robin Hood, smiting him upon the shoulder. I make my vow thou art one of the best archers ever mine eyes beheld. Thou shouldst be a free and merry ranger like us, lad, for thou art better fitted for the greenwood than for the cobblestones and grey walls of London town. So saying, he took his place, and drew a fair round arrow from his quiver, which he turned over and over ere he fitted it to his bowstring. Then the king muttered in his beard, Now, blessed Saint Hubert, if thou wilt but jog that rogue's elbow, so as to make him smite even the 2nd ring, I will give thee 80 waxen candles 3 fingers' breadth in thickness to thy chapel and thy matching. But it may be Saint Hubert's ears were stuffed with tow, for he seemed not to hear the king's prayer this day. Having gotten 3 shafts to his liking, merry Robin stood carefully to his bowstring ere he shot. Yea, quoth he to Gilbert, who stood nigh him to watch his shooting, thou shouldst pay us a visit to merry Sherwood. Here he drew the bowstring to his ear. In London, here he loosed his shaft, thou canst find naught to shoot but nooks and daws. There one can tickle the ribs of the noblest stags in England. So he shot even while he talked, yet the shaft lodged not more than half an inch from the very centre. By my soul, cried Gilbert, art thou the devil in blue to shoot in that wise? Nay, quoth Robin, laughing, not quite so ill as that, I trust. And he took up another shaft and fitted it to the string. Again he shot, and again he smote his arrow close beside the centre. A 3rd time he loosed his bowstring and dropped his arrow just betwixt the other 2 and into the very centre, so that the feathers of all 3 were ruffled together, seeming from a distance to be one thick shaft. And now a low murmur rang all among the crowd, for never before had London seen such shooting as this, and never again would it see it after Robin Hood's day had gone. All saw that the king's archers were fairly beaten, and stout Gilbert clapped his palm into Robin's, owning that he could never hope to draw such a bowstring as Robin Hood or Little John. But the king, full of wrath, would not have it so, though he knew in his mind that his men could not stand against these fellows. Nay, cried he, clenching his hands upon the arms of his seat, Gilbert is not yet beaten. Did he not strike the clout thrice? Although I have lost my wager, he hath not yet lost
The first prize they shall shoot again and still again, till either he or that knave Robin Hood cometh off the best. Go thou, Sir Hugh, and bid them to shoot another round, and another, until one or the other is overcome.
Then Sir Hugh, seeing how wroth the king was, said never a word, but went straight away to do his bidding. So he came to where Robin Hood and the others stood, and told them what the king had said. With all my heart, quoth merry Robin, I will shoot from this time tomorrow day, if it can pleasure the most gracious lord and king. Take thy place, Gilbert, lad, and shoot. So Gilbert took his place once more, but this time he failed, for a sudden little wind arising, his shaft missed the centre ring, but not by more than the breadth of a barley straw. Thy eggs are cracked, Gilbert, quoth Robin, laughing, and straightway he loosed a shaft, and once more smote the white circle in the centre. Then the king arose from his place, and not a word said he, but he looked around with a baleful look, and it would have been an ill day for anyone that he saw in a joyous or merry look upon his face. Then he and his queen and all the court left the place, but the king's heart was brimming full of wrath. After the king had gone, all the yeomen of the archer guard came crowding around Robin, Little John, Will, and Allen to snatch a look at these famous fellows from the mid-country. And with them came many that had been onlookers at the sport for the same purpose. Thus it happened presently that the yeomen, to whom Gilbert stood talking, were all surrounded by a crowd of people that formed a ring about them. After a while, the 3 judges that had given away the prizes came forward, and the chief of them all spake to Robin and said, According to the agreement, the first prize belongeth rightly to thee, and so I give thee the silver bugle, and here the quiver of 10 golden arrows, and here a purse of 20 golden pounds. And as he spake, he handed those things to Robin, and then turned to Little John. To thee, he said, belongeth the second prize, to wit 50 of the finest harts that run on Dallin Lee. Thou mayest shoot them whensoever thou dost list. Last of all he turned to stout Hubert. Thou, said he, hast held thine own against yeomen with whom thou didst shoot, and thou hast kept the prize duly thine, to wit 2 tuns of good Rhenish wine. These shall be delivered to thee whensoever thou dost list. Then he called upon the other 7 of the king's archers who had last shot, and gave each 80 silver pennies. Then up spake Robin again, and quoth he, This silver bugle I keep in honour of this shooting match, but thou, Gilbert, art the best archer of all the king's guard, and to thee I freely give the purse of gold. Take it, man, and would it were 10 times as much, for thou art a right yeoman, good and true. Furthermore, to each of the 10 that last shot I give one of these golden shafts apiece. Keep them always by you, so that ye may tell your grandchildren, and ye are ever blessed with them, that ye are the very stoutest yeoman in all the wide world. At this all shouted aloud, for it pleased them to hear Robin speak so of them. Then up spake Little John.
Good friend Tapus, said he, I want not those hearts of Dallin Lee that yon stout judge spoke of but now, for in truth we have enow, and more than enow in our own country. 20 I give to thee for thine own shooting, and 5 I give to each band for their pleasure.
At this another great shout went up, and many tossed their caps aloft, and swore among themselves that no better fellows ever walked the sod than Robin Hood and his stout yeomen. While they so shouted with loud voices, a tall burly yeoman of the king's guard came forward, and plucked Robin by his sleeve.
Good master, quoth he, I have somewhat to tell thee in thine ear. A silly thing, God wot, for one stout yeoman to tell another, but a young peacock of a page, one Richard Partington, was seeking thee without avail in the crowd, and, not being able to find thee, told me that he bore a message to thee from a certain lady that thou wottest of. This message he bade me tell thee privately, word for word, and thus it is. Let me see. I trust that I had forgotten not. Yea, thus it was. The lion growls, beware thy head.
Is it so? Quoth Robin, staring, for he knew right well that it was the queen that sent the message, and that she spake of the king's wrath. Now I thank thee, good fellow, for thou hast done me greater service than thou knowest this day. And then he called his 3 yeomen together, and told them privately what they had best be jogging, as it was like to be ill for them to be so nigh merry London town. So, without tarrying longer, they made their way through the crowd until they had come out from the press. Then, without stopping, they left London town and started away northward. Alas the time! I must away. But fear not, dear friend, we shall return. I look forward to when we meet again to continue on our tale.